Well, good afternoon. It's great to have you with us here on GNN Radio today. We've got a very special guest with us in the studio. It is South Carolina Lieutenant Governor Kevin Bryant, and he's come by today. And Kevin, it's great to have you with us.
Well, Brian, thank you for having us. It's great to be here.
Well, I've been able to talk with you a time or two over the years and kind of watch a little bit of your career. And you guys have the primary coming up June 12th. So we are really about a month out from that. And that's an important day for South Carolina because there's a lot going on as far as deciding who will be running for the governor. And you certainly have your hat in the ring on that.
Yes, sir. We have our hat in the ring for governor. There are 5 on the Republican side, 3 on the Democrat side running for governor. And we have traveled this state. We've been to every corner of this state, more than all the other campaigns combined. And it's just been a great experience to meet folks all over South Carolina and answer their questions and listen to their concerns. And it's just really been a blessing to have this experience.
Well, I know that you've been serving, you've been a state senator and then now the lieutenant governor. You're doing all of this work that you're doing across the state. You're going, having all these meetings. I've seen your agenda. It's quite impressive. And I would imagine talking with the people from community to community, that's kind of helped you come up with this contract that you've got several issues that you feel like are important to the people of South Carolina. One of them, though, kind of struck my interest. You talk about ethics reform. And I don't know if a lot of people are familiar in South Carolina with the level of good old boy corruption and that kind of thing going on.
It is awful in Columbia, Brian. And we'll hear the president talk about the swamp in Washington, and we have the same problem in Columbia, which the first thing on our contract is ethics reform. We've actually written a bill called the South Carolina Anti-Racketeering Act. 2/3 of the states have this racketeering, and we base it off of Georgia's racketeering law. But the focus of this ongoing grand jury political corruption investigation is centered around a political consultant. His name is Richard Quinn.
Okay. And
had we had this racketeering law in effect, it wouldn't take the prosecutor as long as it has to piece all these together.
Okay.
Brian, you can't be a political consultant, a lobbyist, a elected official, and a government consultant all at the same time.
Yeah.
We had a legislator, Rick Quinn, caught selling his vote for millions of dollars, and he paid a $1,000 fine. That is an insult to the taxpayers of South Carolina, and it's an invitation for corruption.
Well, it sure is. Matter of fact, as soon as you told me that, I thought that would lure some other people.
Absolutely. I mean, that's just cost of doing business. If a crooked politician wanted to engage in these illegal activities, $1,000 fine, that's no big deal. So it's just an invitation for corruption.
Right.
So this Anti-Racketeering Act is based on the federal RICO law that the federal government used to break down the mob. Well, we have mob-like activity in South Carolina. Matter of fact, a nickname for Richard Quinn is the Godfather.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The Godfather. And we've got a sponsor and several co-sponsors in the House. We've got a sponsor and several co-sponsors in the Senate. The sponsor in the House is from Greenville, Representative Jason Elliott. The sponsor on the Senate side is from Spartanburg, Senator Shane Martin. And we want to get this out to the people because they don't understand the level of corruption in Columbia. The government in Columbia needs to be returned to the taxpayer.
Right.
And right now it's run by special interests and lobbyists and
so we not only have a swamp in D.C., we've got
the same problem in Columbia.
Okay.
We've got the same problem in Columbia.
Well, let me ask you this then, because that becomes a point of discussion for your candidacy for governor, and what are some of the things that can be done from that vantage point to reform?
One of the problems in South Carolina, which is another breeding ground for corruption, is we are known nationally as the legislative state.
Okay.
we have the strongest legislature in the country. We have the weakest executive branch. And our founders envisioned three distinct branches of government: the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive branch. We really have one branch of government in South Carolina, and that's the legislature. Ben Tillman wrote the Constitution in 1895. Back then, the fear was a majority of South Carolina would elect a black governor, and he did not want this governor to have any power.
So that's right in the height of Jim Crow era.
That's the whole basis for the system of government we have in South Carolina. And the prime example of how the legislative state does not work is our Department of Transportation. The legislature last year passed the highest tax increase in South Carolina. Well,
that's a sore spot for me. Yeah.
I've got bad news for you. It's not going to fix your roads.
Right.
Because you don't know who to hold accountable.
Well, we already had the money anyway to fix the roads.
We had the money, but where's it going? Right now, the taxpayers spent $350 million for a brand new 5-lane highway going from Florence to Pamplico.
Right.
Do you know where the Speaker of the House and the President Pro Tem of the Senate are from? Florence. And we've seen it. We've seen the money flow to Greenville. We've seen the money flow over to Beaufort and then to Charleston. Now it's just shifted over to Florence. And we'll take this message of reform to Florence. And they get it. They understand it's their turn now, but it's not going to last forever.
Right.
But the DOT needs to be a cabinet-level agency under the governor so the taxpayers of this state know who to hold accountable. And then folks ask, well, how do you get the legislature to let go of that power?
Yeah, I'd be concerned about that.
Well, I have given this illustration all over the state hundreds of times, and I have yet to find a single taxpayer disagree with the proposal that the DOT needs to be a cabinet-level agency under the governor. Not a single one.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, when I was a member of the Senate, in 2008, we had this debate of the DOT. Governor Sanford would take the message to the taxpayer all over the state, insisting on a DOT cabinet-level agency. We had a vote in the Senate in 2008, and we only lost by one vote. And at that time, our roads weren't anywhere near on the radar of the taxpayers like it is today.
Right.
So now you've got a higher gas tax. You still have your potholes. You still have crumbling bridges. And there's just, because of the system, because you don't know who to hold accountable, there's too many decisions based on politics rather than public safety and traffic flow. But if we get this under the governor, so the taxpayers know who to hold accountable for fixing their roads, as your governor, these decisions by me will be made based on traffic flow and public safety, not politics.
Okay. All right. Well, you know, that's an important thing because we do see the impact of that and we wonder, well, you know, how did this happen? And, you know, one person, we're going to talk next hour. Matter of fact, just to let folks know, we'll be talking now with Lieutenant Governor Kevin Bryant and also continue this next hour. We're going to talk a little bit about the pro-life issue. You've got to be in Conway later on this evening. So
yes, sir. We're headed down to Conway tonight.
So we want folks to know a little bit about this, but the whole situation with reforming the whole office and being able to do this, I thought about just a few years ago. Governor Jim Hodges, talked about if we got the state lottery, then we could fix our education. We'd be able to fund it that way. And of course, it hasn't played out that way for us any more than it did Georgia.
Brian, anytime the tax collectors come to you and say, we just need a little more money and this problem will go away. The lottery didn't fix education. The cigarette tax didn't fix Medicaid.
Right.
The penny didn't fix education.
Right.
This gas tax is not going to fix your roads.
Right.
It's the system that's the problem, not the amount of tax dollars that you're sending to Columbia. This last year's budget that's being debated right now, $28.5 billion. That's a lot of money on a small state like South Carolina. And we talk about the national debt, over $20 trillion.
Right.
South Carolina, the taxpayer, has a burden of over $50 billion of debt and unfunded liabilities.
Wow.
It's Washington all over in Columbia, and it's unfortunate, but we're willing to take on the trough dwellers, take on the special interests, take on the tax collectors, and return this government back to the taxpayer.
Very good. We're speaking with Kevin Bryant. He's Lieutenant Governor for South Carolina, running for governor. The primary is coming up on June 12th, and we'll be talking with him this next hour as well. So we appreciate your tuning into GNN Radio.